Hey, what's up everybody? It's Matt from Rocky's War Room. And today I have a special video for you. I show you how I paint the new C3M25 Heavy Combat Drone for the game Beyond the Gates of Antares by Warlord Games. This is a step-by-step process on how I did it. You don't have to do it this way, but in case you'd like to do it this way, you can switch out colors. It doesn't matter. You should be able to get the same result that I got here. So you can freeze your camera, or you can press pause, I should say. These are the colors I used. These are all the colors I used to paint the M25. You can freeze on any one of these pictures to go find those exact colors if you need to. The numbers are in the picture. I did the best I could to show you guys exactly which colors I used for this whole entire tutorial. So step one, we're gonna grab our Vallejo Surface Primer, black, to do obviously a, and our airbrush, to do a complete coat in black to start our shadowing effect. I do a lot of this on my tanks for bolt action and stuff like that, where I do this black undercoat with a white surface primer on the high parts, leaving the black on the inner, most crevices and stuff like that. And I just go over this whole entire vehicle with the black. I was having problems with my airbrush there, and there it goes. It was clogged right off the bat. I couldn't figure out why, so I took it apart, cleaned it up, and it started flowing very nicely. The reason why I use an airbrush is it's much easier and it's much quicker. I have found, after the few times that I've used it already, to get things finished and painted. The surface primer can be put right into the airbrush with a little bit of thinner, and it flows out perfectly with a clear, a real thin coat, especially with this black, because there's a lot of paint that's going to be sprayed over it. And obviously, if I was doing this with a paintbrush, this would take a significant amount more of time. So using the airbrush was a big time saver for me. So it's working great now. Make sure you thin it down just a little bit. You don't need much. So, and I'm going to prime the whole thing, including the weapons. There's a couple weapons options for the M25. I will prime those as well in black, just like I would this, because I chose to do a camouflage scheme similar to that of a King Tiger from bolt action. I thought it would look really awesome on the Concorde. I struggled for a long time to try to figure out how I'm going to paint the Concorde. And by painting this, when this M25 showed up and I looked at it, I said, oh my gosh, that's it. So now I have a paint scheme for my Concorde force. So I'm going to take this one painted M25 and pass that along to my next vehicles and my whole Concorde force. So it's coming out smoothly. Already looking pretty cool. So as you can see, I pretty much got the top of it started to be covered, and I'm getting it finished off. And I'm holding it in many different angles because I don't want to miss anything. With a brush, it's easy to hold it around all over the place and stick some, stick the a brush in the paint and get the nooks and crannies in there that you might have missed. It's real easy, but you gotta, when you're airbrushing, you really gotta hold it from all angles to make sure you get absolutely everything primed. The last thing you want is a spot that you missed and you don't realize it until later on, after you've pretty much finished almost the whole vehicle, or when the paint doesn't stick. So you don't want that to happen. So I got the tops of the weapons already. I'm getting the bottom of them as well. I'm going right over the magnets. It's no big deal. It holds the paint for now, but as soon as you get more use out of it, it may scrape it off. So that's why later on I'm going to put a real heavy semi-gloss varnish over the top of it. That way it won't rub as bad, and the paint will actually last a lot longer that way. It won't scrape off. So there we go. So the next thing I do is I take my Vallejo gray surface primer. And the idea with this technique is to hit the upper panels and places that see the most light, and to kind of leave the recesses alone. I was going to leave the bottom of the machine itself. Wasn't going to put any white on it, but I figured, you know what, I'm doing it on the top. I don't want it to look too funny. So I don't do a lot of it on the bottom, but I do a lot on the top and the very most top layers of the M25, the drone here. So I just kind of work my way around it one spot at a time. And as you can see, the black is showing in the crevices and things are standing out a heck of a lot more. So like I accent the front of the wing, the middle of the wing, and the inner part of the wing to let that darkness, that shadow happen. When you put your paint color over the top that you're painting it, you'll see this in your paint coat because it's so thin it goes through. This is just a pre-shading technique to save me time a little bit later, so I don't have to put such a heavy pin wash inside the nooks and crannies and the crevices of the machine itself. So I'm kind of spotting this. It also gives the vehicle a wear and tear look to it. And like I said, it does save you time when you're shading. And you don't have to use a filter if you use this technique, or a complete wash over the whole entire vehicle. So I'm making sure I get all the spots there I can that are on top. And mainly this technique is made for vehicles. I guess you could do this with actual miniatures and humanoid characters and things like that. See, I'm getting kind of the sides. I'm really accenting the front of the vehicle. That's the focal point there. It's going to get the most light on top. So, yeah, there we go. Doing a little bit of a darker, or well, lighter gray shade on the tops there. I had it a little too light for my liking there. But gosh, what a breeze the airbrush makes for doing this. Saves so much time. Because you'd have to get your brush out and your paint out, and then you'd have to get your wash out, and then you have to repaint over the panels and stuff like that. It's just, I think it just looks much better this way, especially with you're doing with vehicles. I'm gonna have to try this on a 28mm miniature, see what it does. So there you go. There's the finished white highlight that I put on there. As you can see, the nooks and crannies are kind of left alone. I just did a dusting underneath there. And once you see my main color, I also did it to the weapons here, I'll show you. But once you see the main color go over it, you'll see why I did that white and black pre-shading to make the crevices and the nooks and crannies of the actual vehicle itself stand out more and save me time as far as shading goes. So I got a mixing cup, and we're going to mix together Vallejo dark yellow, Model Air dark yellow. And we're going to put it in a mixing cup. This is how I mix my airbrush paints. I don't do it in the airbrush itself. I think it mixes better if you do it in a cup. Several drops there. And then I use an airbrush thinner. I put, I think like 5 or 6 drops. I want to make it a milky consistency. And then I add this Mission Models polyurethane mix additive. Now what this is a natural drying retardant. And I never, ever, ever get a clog with my airbrush when I use that stuff. You only need 1 or maybe 2 drops in it. It doesn't really keep the paint from drying that much once it's on the model. It keeps it from drying inside the airbrush. It's wonderful stuff. I use it on everything. And after I mix that together, I'll put it in my airbrush, and we'll get going on the dark yellow. And you'll guys start to see why I did all that pre-shading with the airbrush, with the gray and the white. So testing it, making sure that I'm getting yellow coming out of it. And here we go. Get that out of the way. And we'll start by even coats, nice and thin coats. Make sure you do wear a respirator when you're using airbrush paints. I forgot to mention that. I am wearing a respirator. Little bitty paint particles get in the air and you don't want that in your lungs. So make sure you wear some sort of mask or respirator. And there you go, there's the yellow going on. You do a nice even thin coat, so you don't want to put it on heavy like you did with the primer. You just kind of want to start the yellow off with thin coat, just like you do with painting miniatures and things like that. And you know, when you're painting miniatures, you want to do 2 thin coats. And as you can see, as I continue to do the thin coats, the yellow is starting to build up naturally over the top of the white. And you can see where it's lighter and where it's darker after I paint it. So you can kind of already see that where it was white, it's much brighter yellow, and where it was black, where it's black, it's a much darker yellow. So as we go to the finished product here of the yellow, there's the weapons. I go over them where I need to. I left the other gun barrel black because it looks like it's been firing a lot. But as you can see, where it was dark, you get a much darker yellow, and where it was bright, you get a much brighter yellow. So all the shading has been done for me already, rather than having to put one giant filter over the top of it and painting, using a brush. So the next color I use is a Mission Models color called Rot Brawn. Now this color I normally use for my tiger tanks. When I'm painting a tiger tank or a panther, this is kind of like a reddish brown color that they used, almost like a chocolate brown, something like that. If you were to find an equivalent color, it's got a lot more red in it than the chocolate brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my camouflage stripes with it. Kind of like in the same pattern as you would a tiger or panther tank. My original idea though is to do a green over top of the red, but I just stuck with the red because I thought, wow, this looks pretty awesome. I don't really have to go any further. So just nice, even, controlled sprays. I'm getting a little bit closer to the model with the airbrush, trying to control where I put the color, because you don't want to have it, you don't want it to all go, everywhere. You want to leave the yellow to be seen on the model itself, in between for the camouflage. And really, I have no rhyme or reason for the way I'm doing it. I'm just spraying it on where I think it should be, kind of like a, letting my artistic mind wander with the airbrush. I'm just going over it in just odd patterns and filling in where I think I might have missed, where I think it might look cool. I kind of wanted my Concorde to have some sort of camouflage, and I tested a bunch of colors on a test model that I had, and a blue, a white, I had a yellow, I had black on orange and all this other stuff, and I just didn't like it. And then it hit me. I go, well, why not do it like I do camouflage on bolt action stuff? And boom, here it is. Here's the idea. So you can definitely take this painting tutorial and apply it to your tiger tanks or your panther tanks, just adding the green over the top of the red. It's really all you have to do if you're dealing with a tiger tank. So it could definitely help you with your bolt action tanks as far as this tutorial goes, as far as the camouflage on the tanks itself. So already got some cool wicked patterns going on it. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. So here you can see it's already starting to come together. It's starting to look like an awesome vehicle. It's starting to look like it belongs in some sort of far off planet where it's camouflaged to the planet, like a Mars or a desert planet or something along those lines. It looks really cool. It organically came together, and I'm almost finished with it. It's the fastest I've ever painted a vehicle, and I'm very happy with it. And as you can see, I matched the gun with the camouflage. I just put the weapon on top with the magnetized, and I sprayed where it needs to be sprayed and put it back down. So there's the camouflage pattern. It's looking really cool. Very happy with it. So The next thing I do is put a semi-gloss clear coat over the entire thing using Mission Models clear coat, the thinner and the polyurethane mix additive in there with the semi-gloss clear coat. Now, the reason why you do all this is you want to protect the work you've already done before you do any kind of wash or pin wash or anything like that. You definitely want to use some sort of clear coat, matte coat, something along those lines to protect the finish that you already have. So as you're painting the rest of the stuff, you don't nick it or something like that. Not only that, I think that the washes and the pin washes and things like that flow much better on the vehicle when you go to damage it. And what I mean by damaging it, I mean when you go to weather it. So when you use a gloss coat or a semi-gloss coat over the top of it, I think that the wash and the weathering, like rain damage and rain streaks and grime and stuff like that, actually stick and flow off the vehicle much better. I use a semi-gloss because it's in between the gloss and the flat varnish, and I think it gives a little bit more of a coat, a harder coat, than just using matte varnish. I will put this layer on, let it dry for 3 to 4 hours, and then I'll put a second layer on just to make sure that it's extra protected. And what you can do if you don't prefer a semi-gloss and you prefer just nothing but a matte finish, you can just use the semi-gloss first or gloss and then spray a matte varnish over the top of that, and you're still good. And this semi-gloss, I cannot highly recommend if you use an airbrush to use Mission Model paints. They don't have a huge range of paints. They have a big one, but they don't have a huge range of paints. But I will tell you that their semi-gloss and gloss and their primers are pretty top-notch. Their semi-gloss is not very shiny. It's still got a very, once you see the end pictures, it has a very hint of a shine, just a very small hint of a shine. It's almost like the polyurethane matte varnish that I use from Vallejo products. It has a little bit of a shine to it. But if you put it on clear enough and thin enough with an airbrush, that shine does not overpower. Now, I will take a brush later on with the semi-gloss, and if you're using a brush, you're putting too much on. You need to use a small amount. But if you put it on like you put it on paint, it's going to have a gloss to it. But when you're using thin coats with an airbrush, it barely has one. It still has a very much of a matte finish, as you will see later. And I'm getting into every nook and cranny with this. I spend quite a bit of time doing this gloss finish because I don't want anything to chip, and I don't want to lose the work that I've already done. So. And when you're using the varnish, of any kind of varnish on a vehicle, you want to move it in every direction. Top, bottom, left, right, twirl it around. Because you can't really see, you can see a little bit of wetness when it comes out of your airbrush on the vehicle itself. You got to trust that it's coming out and keep doing test sprays on your surface or on a towel to make sure, or on your rubber glove to make sure it is coming out, because they do have a tendency of clogging. These varnishes do have a tendency of clogging your airbrush. Now, I used the additive, but I should have used a couple more drops of the Mission Models additive to this, and I don't think it would have clogged as much. But I had to keep taking a Q-tip to the front of the airbrush where the needle is with some airbrush cleaner from time to time to clean out the airbrush in the front tip, because it dries so fast. This semi-gloss, as you can see, it kind of has a little bit of a glossiness to it already. But that's how I know that there's something on there for sure. And as you can see, I have the cap off to make sure that there's some in there, because I thought that I lost all the, I thought I lost, I lost the spray, or ran out of the stuff, but I didn't. You don't need a lot. I put too much in there. Now I'm spraying over the weapons. Now, These weapons are magnetized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take extra special care of spraying these 2 or 3 times, putting this gloss on. See how I cleaned out the airbrush there? It kept doing that. On the weapons itself, because we're going to be handling those weapons quite a bit when we swap them out on the vehicle itself. So you want to give them a nice good coat, especially underneath where the magnets are. I usually spray it like the whole weapon. I spray the whole weapon, and then I will take a brush with the same gloss over the magnet side so it moves easy. And if you have some sort of like turret that you move, you want to brush on some semi-gloss or some gloss underneath that turret so it has a smooth surface with no friction to turn that turret around and protect the paint at the same time. So that's why you see me putting it on so heavily. As you can see towards the end of this spray, I'm getting more clogged because I didn't have enough of the additive in there. And I keep checking to make sure. And then that's where I sprayed the housing for a second time where the magnets are pretty heavy, and that's going to have the highest glossy finish. So when it's being pulled in and out, it's not knocking off the paint. And these are metal pieces too. So I use an extra coat of the semi-gloss on metal parts, especially because we all know, if you've experienced painter, that when you deal with metals and you don't put a varnish on it, it chips so easily, even if you put spray paint on it. The metal pieces do. So I turn it over and I'm giving it a heavy spray real close on the other side of the weapon itself, the part that you're never going to really see because the weapon's always going to be on there. But see, I'm cleaning it out again with a Q-tip. That is a quick tip. If your airbrush ever gets clogged real bad, just take a Q-tip, put some airbrush cleaner on that Q-tip, and just don't dig it in. Just rub it over the front, and sometimes that's all it takes. Just like that. And then you can continue to spray again. So as you can see, I'm adding the second coat underneath. And just a small coat. It doesn't have to be a real big coat. And that's the varnish. So now I move on. I use some sticky tack and an extra flight stand to hold it with. So as you can see, we have a bare spot now. Now this I'm not really all that concerned about. This is probably going to be the least part that you see on the vehicle itself. But all I use is the surface primer, take some dark yellow with a brush and brush over it. And because it's in model air paint, you're probably going to have to brush it on a few times. As you can see, that's one coat. And you got to keep it thin so it'll match. So use your surface primer and use your dark yellow with a brush. And I glued it in there, because I have a tendency of knocking vehicles off of their stands. So the next step is to take our soft tone wash. This is made by Army Painter, and I find that Army Painter makes excellent washes. And we're going to do a pin wash. What a pin wash is you don't cover the whole entire model. That would be called a filter. You don't cover the whole entire model. You just put some of it on a palette, get some water, just enough water on the brush, mix it up real good to thin it down. I'd say probably that would be probably a brush full, a big brush full. And then you take a smaller brush, and all you do is put it into the crevices of the vehicle. So as you can see, there's a lot on this big guy. So you just make sure to take care not for it to run. If it runs, you can just clean it up with water right quick. And all you want to do is just get the wash into these nooks and crannies. And what you'll find, it adds a really, really awesome looking shadow to the vehicle itself. So as you can see, it's already given it some depth. So we're going to pin wash this whole entire vehicle in this way with this soft tone wash. Oh, you're off camera. Get on camera. There you go. All right, so we're going to continue to do this pin wash over the whole entire vehicle and every nook and cranny we can find. This takes the longest time on this vehicle. And there you are after the pin wash. As you can see, it's got more depth. I think it looks awesome.
It's really coming along. And the next thing we're going to do is grab our Luftwaffe green, camouflage green, and we're going to start painting the orbs or the lenses. Now there's one thing that there's different about this. I went over with a Vallejo black over the engines. I believe that's what they are. As you can see, they're all painted nice and neat black. I forgot to mention that. Just go over black if you want them black, or you can keep them the camouflage color if you want. But I take this Luftwaffe green and I just kind of pick out 2 or 3 orbs on each side and make them green. And I have a second color that I use for the orbs, 2 different, orbs, but dark Prussian blue and the Luftwaffe green on these lenses. And we're going to brighten these lenses. And also I use the blue on the gun itself too, on the weapon. So you just kind of base coating these lenses in a dark color. This is going to be our bottommost color. It will stand out and you will see through it somewhat. It adds a shadow. This is our pre-shading with a brush, basically. So I'll go and paint the rest of the ones that haven't been painted with the green, the blue. Now we're going to start with the blue because that's what the weapons are. So we're going to take a deep sky blue from Vallejo Model Color. And we're just going to mix it with water, right about 25, 75, 25 water, 75 paint. And we're just going to hit the tops of all of our blue lenses with this deep sky blue. So anywhere we have deep sky blue, we're just going to paint the majority of the top. We're going to leave the very bottom edges that is indented into the vehicle, the dark Prussian blue. And we're going to, where I did the vehicle there, the gun, the weapon, it has dark Prussian blue in there. And it's kind of hard to do on camera, but I just paint over the blue with the deep sky blue and in the cracks there to make a blue glow on the weapon itself. So I'm doing the lenses and the weapon. This is just like a blue glow effect. You can actually use this for any kind of blue glow effect. This is how I used to paint power weapons and lightning bolts and things like this with these same colors. So I figured it'd be great for lenses and stuff like that. So now you see it's starting to pop out a little bit. So now we're going to take, which I didn't show at first, we're just going to take straight sky blue and we're going to take and paint the very tops. We're going to leave a little bit of that deep sky blue, as you can see, left over below it. And this is going to be a 50-50 mix, 50 water, 50 sky blue. That way the deep sky blue will show through. So as you can see, it's starting to pop out. And there's the color, sky blue. So now we're going to highlight up our green. So we're going to take a color called deep green. We're going to put this over the top of the Luftwaffe green that's already down there. And we're going to do the same things that we did with the blue. We're going to put the deep green over the top part. Another step that you can take with that blue is you could take an off-white and just, you know, paint the very tip of the lenses to make them even brighter. Now we take our lime green and put it over top of the deep green in the same way we put it over that we did with the deep sky blue. We're going to leave a little bit of that deep green showing. And so now we have 3 colors on there. And all 3 should be showing at this point in basically layering. That's what we're doing here with the orbs, or pardon me, with the lenses. And as you can see, they're really starting to pop out on this vehicle. I think it looks really awesome. And I decided to use 2 colors because in the studio art, they have blue and red. And I have a red camouflage, so I used green. So now we're going to take our yellow green, model color yellow green, and we're just going to hit the tips of each one of the lenses with this. And it adds another dimension and another layer. As you can see, it immediately pops out the second I hit it with my brush. And you're going to take a very small detail brush to do this work with. If you want to take it even further, you just add a little bit of white to the yellow green and just do a dot on the very tip. Just like with the blue, I used an off-white to dot the very tips of all the lenses all the way around. And what this does is adds dimension and layers to your lenses. All right, there it is. There is the C3M25 Heavy Combat Drone with both weapons options, fully painted. I'm super excited about this. It looks awesome. I can't wait to see it on the table. I know it's the heavy. And of course, it needs to be based, and the clear base is fine for now. For me on the table, that way, you know, you're on the ground and stuff like that. I don't always do a base for it, but I think I will for this one once I figure out how I'm going to base the rest of my Concorde. I'm also really excited because with this piece here, I finally decided on a paint scheme for my Concorde. So they're kind of this dark yellow and real brownish red camouflage like look with real like a green and a real bright blue light and sensors and things like that. The only thing I have left to do, of course, is to protect it with a varnish, which I'll do with the airbrush later on. It just, I'm lost for words. I think it looks so cool. And I got this magnetized to where it holds either or. The only thing that I wish I would have done that I didn't do for this build is I wish I would have made this turret move. But it, like I said before, it's my own personal preference to keep it set because I'm clumsy and I knock it over. It would be cool if this turret did move. It is possible to do. So anyway, so there you go, start to finish. You got both weapons painted, and the M25. I think it looks gorgeous. Really happy with this kit. I think this is my favorite machine. My favorite drone out of all the Concorde drones, of course, and out of all the other ones, just the look of it, the sheer look of it. I just think it's pretty, just awesome. And then with the paint job on it, just super stoked about it. Gosh, how long did it take? Well, from build to now, I think I spent maybe total actual time on it about 10 hours, maybe a little bit less. With airbrushing, which I haven't done a lot of airbrushing, and this is like only my second time doing it with an airbrush, and I don't know what I was doing beforehand, but for big vehicles and things along this nature, it saved so much time. It was ridiculous. Like I probably cut my time in half painting this using an airbrush. So you got the underneath, it's all camouflaged, it's all pin washed. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a few things from it on how to paint one of these and put it together and things like that. I appreciate you sticking with me through this whole process and watching this video. And last but not cut this, go to a different video. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole thing. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Please tell a friend. Please spread the word for me. I'd really appreciate that. Leave me some comments. Tell me what you think of this. Tell me how what other things you think I could add to this that make it look even better. I'd appreciate it. And last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta, and we'll catch you in the next video.